Come to order. This is a special council meeting. All council members are present this evening. The mayor graciously has accepted our invitation and will be making a few opening remarks about the settlement agreement. And then he will be leaving for a very important personal commitment. I want to thank Mayor Berry for being with us this evening. And I will turn the floor over to you, Mayor Berry. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Council President Sanchez. Councilors, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come down. This is an important meeting. And it's an important time for us in the city of Albuquerque, for our police department, for our citizens, all individuals who have been engaged in a very robust and as I said, a very important discussion in our community for the past several years. I commend you, Councilor Sanchez, and councilors for meeting tonight. This is something we gave you our word that before we sign this agreement, that we would bring this to the community for review, bring this to the council for review, and let the community have a discussion about this. We are doing that, and so I'm pleased that this meeting is happening tonight. I know that we've got some experts. Scott Greenwood is here with us this evening, our special counsel. We've got Tom Stryker here as well as our staff, and they will be able to answer specific questions about this agreement. What I'd like to do is address some overarching themes that I think are important. One of the themes that is important, with the agreement itself, is that we really work hard. Chief Eaton, Chief Huntsman, the men and women of the Department of Justice, both the U.S. Attorney's Office and those who came in from Washington, and our experts, to craft an agreement that we believe strongly will work, that we believe will provide reforms that will also allow officers to be safe in their duties, that will help our community, members of our community be safe, and it will also help build a really critical and important part of this dialogue with our community, and that is community engagement. I said when we had the press conference in the Department of Justice that there are a lot of technical things in this agreement, and Mr. Greenwood and Stryker and others can talk about some of the specifics. But if we do just that, we just do the technical things, and we don't build a dialogue citywide that we think can last from generation to generation, from mayor to mayor, from chief to chief, from council to council, from community members and their families to others along the road, we won't reach the goals that we want long term in the community. And we've seen examples around the country where that has happened. So I have a lot of faith in our community that we can do that. I have a lot of confidence in this agreement. I know we'll have a lot of folks speaking on this tonight. But it really was crafted in a way that we think will work, it's measurable, so that when the monitor comes in, we will have someone who can actually see a roadmap in place, and it's not overly subjective, but yet it's a living document that allows us an opportunity to make changes in conjunction with the DOJ as time goes on. I commend the council for the police oversight that we put into place and I signed a couple of weeks ago. I think that is a hugely important piece of this opportunity that we have in front of us as well. I certainly encourage everybody in our community to visit our website at abq.gov and go to the Mayor's Corner. That's where you can find out what our community collaborative meetings are. Those are ongoing. Those will be a continuing effort in our community, as well as our community policing councils. And we had our first kickoff meeting with those community policing councils last week, and I think that's another great opportunity for us. I would urge the council to support us in this agreement, and for a couple of specific reasons. You've been a big part of this equation as we've gone through this over the last several years, not just with the Police Oversight Board, but you are the appropriators for the city of Albuquerque. And this agreement, as I've said, it won't be easy. It's a difficult thing to do, and it's not going to be inexpensive. But it's important that we do it and we do it right, and we need you as appropriators to be there, and you have been for us, and we appreciate that. Even with a bill that passed at the last meeting to allow some retention dollars. So once again, I commend you for having a meeting, and commend everybody in our community that has come out to voice your opinions and give us your feedback. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us, and I have every confidence that as a council, as an administration, and a department, as a community, that we can make great strides. And so thank you for allowing me to come down and say a few words.
Mayor, thank you very much for taking the time and being here with us this evening. We are now under approval. That is the only item on the agenda this evening, and that is item A, that is EC 194, the settlement agreement between the Department of Justice and the City of Albuquerque, and I move a due pass.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We are going to go to public comment, and tonight's meeting is a special meeting, so if anyone is going to speak under this item, it has to be germane to the settlement agreement. If you deviate from that, I will ask you to please get back on subject, and if not, I will ask you to please step away from the podium. There will be a 2-minute time limit. The light on the podium will be green for the first minute and a half. Then the bell will ring, and the light will turn yellow, indicating you have 30 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments. At the 2-minute time, it will turn red, and that will indicate your time has expired. And the first 4 speakers I will call, once your name has been called, I would ask you to come to the front of the chambers and be prepared to speak. Tony Perard, Stephen Gotis, Mary Fox, and Kat Dominski. Welcome. Proceed.
I can't believe what I constantly hear about this crooked, corrupt, corporate judicial system consent decree. First of all, it's my understanding that Scott Greenwood has never had a license to practice law and has no business signing a letter of agreement with the DOJ on my behalf. Scott Greenwood is a niche consultant who should also be arrested for fraud along with wife-beater Tom Stryker. There are so many things not mentioned in this decree that people need to wake up and object to it completely. With all due respect to the activist group who have fought for change and the citizens of Albuquerque, APD will never move forward until cop killers are fired and removed from the force and go to jail. And to the DOJ, I won't have some child pretending to be an assistant prosecuting district attorney dictating policy to me about the consent decree. You do not have my consent. I refuse to give you my consent as long as other law enforcement, FBI, U.S. Marshals, sheriffs, and DOJ refuse to make felony arrests. It's time for the ICE will stop for no cop campaign. The so-called chief and other officers constantly say they're abiding by constitutional law. All in law enforcement had better understand their oath of office instead of hiding behind the Constitution. Pick up a book and read the Constitution. It's going to be my mission to see your corrupt world fall. Killer cops go to jail. There will be no justice, no peace. Pardon? This is about the consent decree, and I don't appreciate you interrupting me. May I have 20 more seconds, please?
I'll give you 15 additional seconds.
Thank you. So pick up a book and read, and it's going to be my mission to see your corrupt world fall. Killer cops go to jail. No justice, no peace. America, pick up a book, read the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and Declaration of Independence. For all 3 documents work together to get us our rights.
Next speaker, Stephen Torres, followed by Mary Fox, followed by Kat Dominski. Welcome, Mr. Torres.
Good evening, Council President Sanchez, members of the City Council, supporters, friends, citizens of Albuquerque. It is not an understatement to say that this is an historic moment in the history of this council and this city. I would like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank a lot of people who have put in a lot of effort to make this evening happen and to make this consent decree happen. A lot of people who have been working for a long time. People who have joined us in rallies, demonstrations, telephone calls, letters, emails to the DOJ, people who have marched in protest marches, people who have risked being arrested, and especially those people who have actually been arrested. All to demonstrate and bring light to this serious problem and to try and bring about some solution to that problem. So I want to thank all of those people who made this consent decree happen. I was skeptical this day would ever happen. 2 years ago, if you had asked me if we were ever going to get here, I probably would have bet you anything you wanted to bet it wasn't going to happen. But it did, and it was thanks to the efforts of, again, as I said, a lot of people around the city, around the state, around the country, people who sent in letters and emails from foreign countries, all because they were aware of the problem that we had here and that there needed to be a solution to that problem. I want to thank you, members of the council, for allowing us an opportunity to come and speak before you regularly, even when we said things you didn't want to hear. But thank you for allowing us the opportunity to come, to speak, to vent. There's a lot of work that we still need to do. I hope we can all join together in seeing this thing through to a proper finish. Again, thank you, members of the council. Thank you, citizens of Albuquerque. And let's go forward from here together.
Councilor Rodriguez, Mr. Torres? Councilor Rodriguez has a question for you.
It's not really a question, Mr. Torres. I just wanted to say, I've said it in the past, but I'd like to say it again, so it's on the record. I'm very sorry for what's happened to your family. Sorry for the pain that you've gone through. But I certainly want to thank you for having the courage and the ability to come before us and tell us how you feel and the fact that you think that there are opportunities for us to move forward in a positive way. But again, Haley, I want to tell you, excuse me, sorry for what's happened to you.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Torres, I have a couple of comments. I've known you and Renetta for such a long time and your entire family. And I would also like to express my condolences for your loss. And I want to thank you for having the courage to be at several of these community meetings. And it took a lot of courage to go out, talk to members of the DOJ, talk to the members of the public, and also coming to the Albuquerque City Council for several years expressing your concerns. But I know that your voice was listened to, I've heard, and I know the DOJ implemented a lot of the recommendations in the settlement because of your efforts and your work.
It wasn't just my efforts. There were a lot of people behind us. A lot of people who deserve a lot more thanks and honor than we do, but thanks.
But it was a collaborative effort by a lot of people, and I want to thank you for leading that charge in many ways. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mary Fox, Ted Minsky. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you for letting me speak. I just recently moved to Albuquerque, in fact, about a year and a half ago, in the wrong spot in Kansas. And of course, a lot of my friends said, "You're moving where?" But I think there's much promise here. I'm kind of saddened as I read what I've read here, because it's an opportunity I've had to see a more humane, warm, encouraging approach to the training of these young people who are going into in the force. They face death every day, they face dirty words, they face all kinds of things, but their approach is so important too. It is important for them to give everybody a chance, as we in turn will give it to them. I hope that some of that will be added to this, a more humane, open, saying to these people, there's a lot going on out there in the world. A lot of people have a lot of problems, a lot of pressure, a lot of struggles. You're not here as the Gestapo. You are here to contribute to the well-being and the success of Albuquerque. It pretty much says what I have to say.
Well, thank you. Geraldine Amato, welcome back.
Good evening, men and women. I believe if most of us understood the situation we're in today, historically and in reference to what was established during the Revolutionary era, we would understand that this settlement agreement is a hoax and a charade. The problems we have with the local police departments stem from the U.S. Department of Bogus Justice. Today, the authority of the people has been co-opted by instituting a municipal corporation on top of what was the lawful government. The sheriff was supposed to be the chief executive officer of the county. The sheriff now takes orders from Bar Association operatives, just as everyone else does. The jury systems are supposed to be under the control of the people through the sheriff's authority. Today, they are under the control of the Bar Association operatives. And this American Bar Association is a rogue organization. It makes sure that any person who has the authority of a licensed attorney, whether at bench or at bar, is under the thumb of those who control the American Bar Association. Who are those who control the Federal Reserve backs the cartel and all its economy that it affects. If we, the people, do not reassert our authority per the principles of the Declaration of Independence, we are looking for, or we're looking forward to, an all-out authoritarian, murderous, they call it a police state. It has nothing to do with the police at the local level. It has to do with the people at the top who control us. And as one man aptly put it, appealing to the U.S. Department of Bogus Justice is like appealing to the chief of the bandits to correct the bandits. We have rogue police officers, but they're positioned on purpose. They are not there by accident.
Thank you.
We're getting rid of good people on purpose.
Mr. Muller, your time is expired. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you don't have that much time for
Pablo
other than the
Reyes.
official pronouncement.
Pablo. Again, this is your first warning. Please hold your applause. Pablo Reyes, Roger Mickelson, Francis Koensberg, and Jennifer Oaks. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Well, I'm here to address the City Council. Louder. Okay, I'm here to address the City Council of Fort Said. I was dealing with the Police Oversight Commission and their civil rights training about 4 years ago. And I'm here to let the City Council know that we can pull through with the settlement agreement. I'm going to need some help. I've notified the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners. Hiding behind concrete and not listening to what people's going to say, that people are going to say is not going to work. I feel the lady's frustration. So when we come before you, I'd appreciate some help. I'm going to continue filing papers in our local courts and our county courts for additional help. And I'm here to let you know we can go through with the settlement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Roger Mickelson, Francis Koensberg, Jennifer Oaks, and Barbara Northus. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you, Council President, Councilors. I've read through the agreement. I have not read every word. There's a great amount of detail in there. I've read the summary, which I believe to be accurate. I think the time has come to work together to restore some mutual respect, trust, and confidence between our protectors in law enforcement and the public they serve. In our representative republic, our elected officials have worked hard to finalize the agreement, come up with rational ways of approaching this to balance civil rights of the public and the needs of law enforcement to maintain law and order. It's now time to find common ground, probably a step at a time, rather than dissension, criticism, and anger. We have to implement some rational, appropriate changes to reach the agreed goals. That's mutual respect, trust, and confidence. So thank you for your work. I hope that this implementation of this agreement is done with great care and balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Koensberg? Jennifer Oaks? Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. President, Councilors. Nancy Koensberg. I've been before you for other reasons. I am now affiliated with APD Forward, which is a diverse partnership of 17 organizations and individuals who are committed to maintaining, if you will, public oversight of the process as this unfolds. We had a press conference yesterday where lawyers who are working with APD Forward presented some of their analysis. There are many good things about the agreement, which can be a roadmap to a way forward to create public safety and officer safety. A few of those things, very few, are raising standards for the applicants for APD, require an annual use of force report, higher level of accountability and higher levels of supervision, more supervisors in the field. and commitment to protect officers who come forward to tell the truth about incidents that they've observed. I've got 4 points that I want to make to you all tonight about things that I think are serious enough that you might need to think about what you're doing in this and make recommendations to the DOJ and the administration. First, the use of cameras is an excellent thing, and it's certainly progressive in the country. However, there is no mandatory serious discipline for failing to comply with the camera requirement, which the APP Forward legal panel thinks is a huge problem. SWAT is going to be, there's going to be a mission for SWAT, everything has to be clear. However, there is no criteria to govern SWAT deployment, which is left to APD to develop. We've got some concerns about the monitor. I appreciate that everybody's on a fast track. However, I think it's really important that the person be an expert and qualified, and I would really hope that you would implore the parties not to hire somebody within 60 days, just to hire somebody within 60 days. The role is critical, it is too important, and it'll take a national search to find an appropriate person. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor Barry, for saving our city. Many of these shootings are staged for profit. APD shootings have been the top criminal racket by domestic terrorists being paid by our foreign enemies to destroy our New Mexico police departments. And I encourage you to take your time weighing this settlement agreement. 2 officers just died in mysterious circumstances. Our U.S. government officials and employees, including active duty military police, firefighters, veterans, civic leaders, and their families have become targets with multi-million-dollar bounties on their heads. These uniformed men have been loyal to you. I ask you to be loyal to them, okay? These terrorists are not cute little bunnies, okay? When all these shootings happen, these people were not marching over to the homeless shelter to be cooking dinners for the homeless, okay? These people were doing hardcore criminal acts. Many of them had the wrong license plate on their vehicles, okay? This is organized crime at its worst. And I will always continue to defend Albuquerque Police Department because they defended me and my family. My mother's a military widow, okay? I'm targeted every day of my life. When I leave this building, I'm going to be targeted. I'm going to have people following me. I'm not scared. You want to know why? Because I have the officers of Albuquerque Police Department to scare off all of my gang stalkers, okay? And I want to tell you something. I need you to remember Tara Chavez, okay?
Hold on just a moment. Mr. Perard, I'm going to give you a warning, and next time I give you a warning, you're going to be removed from the chambers. Go and proceed. I'll give you 15 more seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I want you to remember Tara Chavez. She was gang stalked and murdered, okay? If a police officer's wife can be murdered in that fashion, what about our families? Okay, my dad, okay, served this nation honorably. He suffered, okay, in the Vietnam War. I'm asking you, please be loyal to the taxpayers of this city. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Barbara Grofus, Dinah Vargas, Nora Anaya, and Reverend Trey Hammond.
No, you're off topic.
Okay.
This is your second warning.
Thank you for this opportunity to allow the citizens a brief moment to make comments about this consent decree. We're still mistrustful, despite the fact that we want this to be a useful process. We still have these killer police on our force. People who killed multiple times are still there. We don't like it. It doesn't seem right. And I guess I just want to say that my biggest concern about, one of my big concerns about this whole process is that we're still talking about training police officers with some sort of mental health practice. I don't think that's sufficient. We should have trained mental health workers on call for these kinds of events. It's not enough to just train the police a little bit in how to deal with some mental health issues. This is a profession. We used to do this. You should talk to Representative Mieta about it. He used to wear a pager back in the day, and they brought people like him to the scene of these kinds of incidents. And it was a much better system than what we are going to have with a little bit of training for our police. So I really urge you to look at that and to find a way to put some teeth into these agreements about cameras and things like this. We don't, I mean, there's just no hope that the police are going to use cameras if they don't have some kind of punishment for not doing it. Just turn it off, have your event, and then turn it back on once the people are out of the way, dead or rounded up. Anyway, thank you again. I would like to hope this is going to be a good process. We definitely need to get a conflict of interest for these people not to be continuing with whoever's supervising us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right on, Parker.
Diana Vargas?
Hi there. I specifically wanted to talk about the monitor because I want to be able to have faith in that process, because I absolutely didn't have any faith in the actual negotiations for obvious reasons, because there was more than a conflict of interest with Tom Stryker and Scott Greenwood with their dealings with Patriot International, the city of Albuquerque, and the list goes on, so you can see where the distress comes from. So absolutely do I consent to Tom Stryker or Scott Greenwood. I hope when they're done cleaning us out, they just head on home. And so I'd ask that you not rush the process of trying to find that monitor, because I think it took a really long time for us to even get to this point. And to rush that process, it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. I'd ask that we consider people inside our own state and within our own city, because I do believe that there are people here, because our state in itself has a very rich culture and a very complicated past. Dating back since before this was New Mexico territory. So I'd ask that you not rush the consent decree, the monitor decision, and please do not hire Hillard and Hines, who I suspect Tom Stryker and Scott Greenwood would recommend, seeing as how they try to recommend them in Cincinnati, Ohio, when a federal judge had to intervene, stating that they had no real experience whatsoever. I'm tired of people coming to our state and building their resumes off of our back. And if we could ensure that, that would be great. I had this for the mayor, but he's always gone. So failed leadership is where this got us here. Specifically Mayor Barry himself, and he will never know exactly what he did to this state and this city, and shame on Mayor Barry. And for the rest of you, good luck, and I hope to work with each and every single one of you, except Don.
Nora Anaya, Reverend Trey Hammond, and then Stephanie Lopez. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nora Tachia-Zanaya. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Council. I'm here to tell you that I feel in the same way as everyone else. I do not consent. This has all been in secret. This has all been behind closed doors, and that is not acceptable. I believe that that is being sneaky, underhanded, and sweeping everything under the carpet as usual. I do not appreciate that I have to speak to you the way I do, but I believe that this is important for you to know how we feel. We can stand on the street corners and speak and say no justice, no peace. We can do everything we can to make you understand that this is not the way to work with your constituents. This is not. Although you believe that it is, we are behind everything that we say. We are standing strong, and we are not going to waver. What I think is really improper is there has been shootings. They shot Boyd Matthew, James Matthew Boyd in the groin. They tried to shoot him in the groin. that already shot Vincent Wood. They shot him in the testicles, and they had no way to find any of the remains. This is unacceptable. Please understand, this is not just a culture of brutality. This is a cult, and you need to understand that you're working with more than what you think. This is demonizing themselves by doing what they're doing, shooting in the back, shooting innocent people. Thank you very much.
Reverend Trey Hammond, Stephanie Lopez. Welcome.
President Sanchez, City Councilors. My name is Trey Hammond. I'm the pastor of La Mesa Presbyterian Church. I'm the co-chair of Albuquerque Interfaith. We're an organization comprised of 25 congregations, schools, unions, and nonprofits. I encourage the city leadership as it enacts the consent decree to not only meet the letter of the law and its implementation, but the spirit of the law and the creation of a better, safer, and more just Albuquerque, and a more responsive and resourceful police department to serve and protect the community. I'm here to speak specifically to portions of the consent decree that deal with issues of mental health and addiction. We as a society and Albuquerque as a city have woefully inadequate services for persons experiencing mental illness and those who struggle with crippling addictions. We have had hundreds of conversations in our institutions and their families all over the city with heart-wrenching stories of how hard it is to get help for the people they love. We understand that the police and firefighters are often called to difficult situations with people experiencing paranoia or drug-induced hallucinations. Too often these situations have not unfolded well. An excessive force was employed when the situation could have had a better outcome if skilled personnel, experts working in such crises, had been on the scene attempting to de-escalate the situation. Therefore, the full funding of APD's Crisis Intervention Unit has to be a priority commitment. Our understanding is that there have been as many as 9 detectives, permanent detectives assigned to that unit, but now there are only 3 permanent detectives. The consent decree suggests that 12 might be the appropriate staffing. In my estimation, there's no reason to wait to fully staff this unit and deploy it in a crisis situation. We urge the city and APD to take necessary measures to get those detectives hired, trained, and deployed to make us safer. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Reverend Hammond. Stephanie Lopez, and the last speaker will be Stephen Crane.
City Council, I just wanted to come take the time to tell you thank you for the work that you do and you put in as well, and to thank you for passing the MOU, and wanted you, or to remind you how well that worked when you've seen the 3 of us work together from the association, the city administration, and the department administration. We know this 105-page report is lengthy, and there's a lot of changes that need to be made. Having spoken with the GOJ ourselves as an association, they've advised us that there's never been a department who's been able to do any type of completion to go on a self-monitoring system within 2 years. Well, I would like for us to be that first department. As hard-hitting as this revision is on what needs to be done, I agree with a lot of people that have come to speak to you before me first, that it is time to move forward. The provisions have already been made on what's expected of the department. I don't think that there's nothing that the department can't do other than staffing being a big issue and being able to work together again. I mean, it's great when we can all work together and complete it that much more quicker, because if we can accomplish this in 2 years, that would be a great achievement for this department as well as our city and our community. We want to do the best that we can in instilling the trust and respect that this community has for our officers once again. And we would hope that the community realizes that officers are given an order, and orders that they're given must be followed. We all have a job to do, and we hope that they would consider that the job that we're doing is to the best of our ability and to keep the community safe. I think if we can work together through this, the association wouldn't need to be the bad guy in some aspects of it. But I think if we continue to work the way we were when it was getting put together and formed, there are going to be problems, and I want you to hear it from me myself first, that if it does get to that problem, I want you to know that I am making my very, very best effort to work with the city administration and the department administration to be able to move forward and get this done in a timely manner.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. I have a comment, Ms. Lopez. I want to personally say thank you for your work with the police department and your union. I had an opportunity to attend a couple of the meetings with some of the police officers and union members. I know that was a very heated meeting, but I think it was a very good dialogue, and there was input both from the members of the Department of Justice and also your officers. So the DOJ did allow for input from police officers, and I want to thank you for setting those meetings up.
Thank you very much, President Sanchez.
Next speaker is Stephen Taylor. Welcome.
Thank you, Council. I appreciated something that Stephanie just said. I'd like to just mention, it's not after it directly, it was the 2 years instead of the typical 4 to 6. It's an interesting concept, because I'm coming before you guys tonight to ask you to not support the decree as it stands, because a lot of people, or a few people tonight, and I mean no disrespect to the Torres family at all, or Mr. Torres, but I don't find the agreement to be historic beyond the fact that it's a historic boondoggle. It's a jobs program for the friends of the administration. There's nothing in it that has made the community happy at all. There's been no one outside of the administration and the people that worked on it that are pleased with it. APD Forward has problems and they're a fairly benign organization. It's really just a watered down, it's exactly what we hired Mr. Greenwood and Tom Stryker to give us. It's a watered down agreement that's pretty much a copy, boilerplate, taken from other agreements. And it does nothing really preventative in our city. So I don't see any reason to spend that much money over a period of 4 to 6 years when we're talking about, it's going to be between $7 and $12 million for the monitor. And that is the big game here, and that's what's been at play. But if we're going to spend the next 4 years executing a decree, we should know that it's really good and that the community really supports it, and the community doesn't support this. There's been no support that I've seen coming forward for it. And along those lines, Ms. Vargas had spoke earlier, I would like to speak about the monitor too, because it's a very important process. The DOJ has said it's the keystone to the process. And we need to be really careful about who we're picking. I don't have the faith that Mr. Stryker and Greenwood can help us negotiate that choice, given the fact that they have been employed by Hillary Hines when they tried for the New Orleans contract. And I was able to speak with Mr. Martinez on Friday and brought this question up, and he said that they were qualified, but U.S. District Attorney Stephen Parker there said they weren't qualified.
Thank you, so, Mr. Kramer. Your time has expired. Well, please hold your applause. We will now have a presentation from Mr. Greenwood and Mr. Stryker regarding the settlement agreement between the Department of Justice and APD and the implementation of the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of council. Tonight really is a watershed moment for the city of Albuquerque. With the conclusion of the negotiation of the settlement agreement between the city of Albuquerque and the United States, this community finally has an opportunity to move in one direction. The administration, the mayor, in partnership with the police department and the Department of Justice and members of the communities that make up this city, to achieve our mutual goals and to achieve our mission. We had as the underlying principles that run throughout this agreement 3 things that are really kind of themes. And we've discussed these privately, but I think it's important to discuss them publicly too. Core values that are embodied throughout this agreement include protection of community safety and officer safety, promoting fully effective and fully constitutional policing, and providing high-quality, high-level police services to the people of Albuquerque. Those underlie and run throughout all 9 major areas of this agreement. And make no mistake, this agreement is not a cookie-cutter agreement or cut and paste. It is the result of hundreds of hours of negotiation, of crafting, putting together an agreement by members of the police department leadership, by the city's team, the city attorney's office, and the administration. And it is very specifically tailored to leverage the strengths of this community and this police department and to address the issues that are in the Justice Department's findings letter. So what it does is to do certain things throughout the agreement in these 9 major sections. The biggest component of the agreement is the one that really led us here in the first place. It's the set of provisions on use of force. That really is the heart of the agreement. And under this agreement, there will be major changes in how the department uses force, trains on force, reports on force, and investigates on force. One key change is that we're creating a serious use of force designation so that higher level or higher quantities of force are reported and investigated differently, and differently than they were in the past. That is a hugely significant achievement. There are changes to policies on how electronic control weapons are used. For the first time, there will be cycle and duration limits for APD and a discontinuation of the use of that weapon for compliance purposes. The department previously implemented, at Chief Eaton's direction, a uniform weapons policy to promote officer and public safety, and the agreement memorializes that. Now, for the first time, force reporting will be much stronger under the agreement than it previously was. All officers will have to report uses of force by themselves and other APD personnel. And when force is investigated, it's going to be investigated not in a cursory way, but it's going to be investigated first by the frontline supervisors, those are the sergeants, and then those serious uses of force will be investigated by internal affairs. That's very, very different from what it was in the past. And that's a real core of the agreement. And then all uses of force will go up the chain of command and will arrive at the desk of the assistant chief and the chief within 24 hours, at least that preliminary report. And when it's finished, an investigation of any use of force, all uses of force, will go to the Force Review Board. That's a new entity that we're creating in this agreement to review all uses of force. There's a lot more training in this agreement on use of force than APD provided officers in the past. They're going to get 40 hours on use of force training instead of 2 hours, or the minimum that would be required under state law. The agreement leverages APD's strength already on behavioral and mental health and makes this department the first one in the country to have universal training of all officers, CIT, and then enhanced levels of responders, a mental health advisory committee to work with the department, to work with the city on formulating and evaluating responses. The agreement very specifically does some things with the tactical units. It provides clear direction for command and control for SWAT. It disbands, at the decision of the chief, it disbands the repeat offender unit. And it requires that all tactical deployments are examined. They will have missions, but they will also have examination after the fact and debriefing, so that the department and personnel can learn from all incidents. Training runs throughout the agreement. There are something like 120 hours that most APD officers will undergo in the first year of the agreement. And that is to reorient them, to give them the skills and the tools that they need to police consistent with the goals of the agreement. Constitutionally, protecting their safety, the safety of members of the community, emphasizing de-escalation and problem solving. The agreement also does critical things with misconduct investigations. It sets up 2 parallel processes, both inside the department, that's the internal affairs provisions, and then officers will carry complaint forms. They'll be available all over the city. And then the Civilian Oversight Agency, created a month and a half ago, has become a much stronger form of civilian oversight and will have a hands-on role in investigating allegations of misconduct. That is consistent with national best practices. The agreement calls for us to do something that hasn't been done in a very long time. It's to take a look at the staffing, and it's to determine not just raw numbers, but it is to look at the staffing in all of the areas that are touched on by the agreement. That will help us determine moving forward if APD has the right personnel in the right places. Are you deploying resources in the right way? We also create here in the agreement a requirement for an early intervention system that works with the internal affairs system in place to identify certain factors that trigger early intervention by personnel's supervisor, so that people who make correctable errors in their careers can receive education, instruction, reorientation, so that those don't become the things that cut short their careers, and to protect the community from having incidents of misconduct that rise to a critical level. This is the first agreement in the country that expressly requires the use of on-body reporting systems. That leverages this city's decision to become really the first large jurisdiction to have a very large-scale deployment of those devices. And it has a component in this provision of the agreement that requires the department to come back in the city after a review of its existing practices and the study being done by UNM to come back with recommendations to the community. And then finally, it has a huge section on community engagement that's really pretty atypical for one of these agreements. It has provisions for meetings in each area command, a requirement for all APD personnel to attend public and community meetings. It recognizes the community policing councils established by the mayor. And then it expressly recognizes the Civilian Police Oversight Agency that you created. That is a very high level of community engagement and oversight that hasn't been contemplated in these agreements in the past. Now I'd like to ask Chief Stryker to talk about what happens when a department begins implementing an agreement like this one in particular.
Go on, proceeds, Chief Stryker.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening to all council members and the people that are here present this evening. I think what's critical for everyone to know and to understand is that a settlement agreement like we've reached here in Albuquerque presents a real opportunity as well as a real challenge to the city and the community itself. From inside the city itself, and more specifically the police department, the settlement agreement requires collection of an enormous amount of data. And not just to collect that data, put it in a box and sit it somewhere and save it for a future date, but actually requires the agency itself to analyze that data so that they constantly have their hands on what are best practices, what perhaps are not best practices, and what may need immediate attention so it can be improved throughout the agency itself. That data itself is also accessible to the community so the community can continue to analyze the activity, the performance, the conduct of their police department, and bring to the city matters that they believe need attention immediately from the city, from the police administration, to help correct the activity of officers or to help provide additional training. When we talk about training, we think that the enhanced training is critically important here because we're hiring police officers to do a very specific task, and that task is very difficult. The difficulty is that they are being challenged and confronted with all the different problems that are in a society at this point in time. Officers are not experts in every field. They can't expect to be experts in every field. They certainly can't expect to be able to address everything that confronts them. Something that Scott talked about, people with mental health issues or people with substance abuse issues. Not all officers have been afforded training in the past, therefore they can't be expected to have all the answers that they need when they're addressing someone with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, or whatever else they can be confronted with. The idea in this settlement agreement is to give them those abilities in part by affording them additional training, but also to bring people who have those skills, who have the education and skill level necessary to address these types of situations. So it's very conceivable that at some point in the future, we could receive a call for assistance and a police officer respond along with mental health professionals, and the mental health professionals are the ones that are there actually addressing these situations, and the police officer simply providing a secure environment for that professional to work in. This is a drastic change in the way policing has been done historically in America, and it's something that the city of Albuquerque certainly is going to embark in, and we believe is going to make a tremendous difference.
Finally, I think what is critically important here also is that the review of incidents, particularly critical incidents, is no longer going to be looked at from the perspective of whether we were right or whether we were wrong in the action that was taken by an officer. The reality of what's going to be occurring in the future is a comprehensive examination of everything, from the very inception of that contact between a citizen and one of our police officers, and following all the way through to the very end, to do a true critique of the incident, to find out whether or not just what happened is appropriate or not appropriate, whether it matches the standards that are in place by the law and by policy and procedure, but to draw out of this incident lessons, to provide options to officers in future training settings that may help alleviate the need for officers to use deadly force or to use any type of force at all. This is what's critically important for this city, for this police administration, to help these officers develop skills that better prepare them to address the situations that they're going to be confronted with in the future. We know this has happened before, we know it's occurring now, we know it's going to occur in the future, so why not take the lessons that are available and apply them to our training that we provide these officers now and in the future to make Albuquerque a much better city and to improve the quality of life for everybody that's here in Albuquerque. That's what this is all about.
Before we go to questions, Mr. President, we'd like to announce, as we move towards the implementation of this agreement, that the very well-respected Dr. Harold Bailey has joined our team to work with us and to work with the community on the implementation. Dr. Bailey is here, and I'd like him to say a few words to address the council.
Welcome, Dr. Bailey. Thank you for being here.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the committee, I'd like to say thank you very much for this opportunity to work with this team. You all know me. I'm here to represent the community. We want to make sure that the community concerns are implemented in this agreement, and I look forward to moving forward. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to respond to, but other than that, I'm happy to be a part of this team.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey, and I'm very pleased to see that you're part of the team. Let's go and open this up to the members of the council for questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Stryker, Mr. Greenwood, or Dr. Bailey? Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Bailey, thank you for also making yourself available to this team. You'll be representing anyone in particular or yourself?
It's a private consultant at this point in time, sir.
So at this point, you're not hired by, maybe once, there's a microphone right there in front of you. At this point, you're not working for the University of Mexico or anyone else?
I've been retired for 2 years from state government, so this is an opportunity for me to get back to the community like I've been doing for the last 40 years or so.
Thank you, and I know you've had it for a long time. Now, I'd like to ask, a lot has been made about the monitor and not rushing into choosing of the monitor, but I'd like to visit or revisit the process for choosing that monitor. And that'll be negotiated between the administration and DOJ, yourselves and DOJ. What is the process?
The provisions in the agreement state that the parties choose the monitor collectively. We really envision in this agreement a high level of continuing engagement between the city, the monitor, and the Department of Justice. We even call for monthly meetings. So we committed in the agreement not to just cast it open and let a court pick a monitor. We agreed to work, to do everything we can collectively for the parties to jointly select that monitor.
And if I may just interject there, could you just quickly describe who the parties are?
Sure. The parties are the city of Albuquerque and the United States.
More specifically?
The parties are the city of Albuquerque and the United States.
But we're not going to be part of it.
You're part of the party. You are the legislative body that is the governing body of the city of Albuquerque, which is a part of the
So we'll be present at the discussion in the choosing of the monitor?
The process, what we've done, President Sanchez and Councilor Gardunio, what we've done in the agreement is commit to that joint selection and issued a request for information that's gone out nationally that will gather all of that information. All of those applications from monitor candidates
will be published, it will be subject to public records disclosure, and it will be available to every member of council as well. So yes, we expect you to weigh in.
But I want to make sure that people understand that when the term city is used, that the city is very specific, and that is the administration, as opposed to the city, which includes 9 elected officials that won't be part of that process.
You will be part of it, Council, Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, you are part of the process because ultimately,
Please hold your comments.
ultimately, council, because you are the appropriators, council will have to vote to approve any contract with the monitor. So you are absolutely involved in the process.
So our job will be to appropriate the funds to pay the monitor.
Yes or no?
President Sanchez, Councilor Gardino, yes.
But we won't be part of the process in choosing the monitor.
President Sanchez, Councilor Gardino, I would like each of you to review and provide comments on all of the monitor applications that we received, each of them.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify what is meant by the parties. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Did you have anything more to add to that? I have a couple other questions, but I yield the floor to anyone else.
We're going to proceed with your question.
Well, the only other question I have is also we've been hearing a lot about on-body recording systems, and I assume that that includes both recording, meaning audio and video or digital video. How is that going to be implemented? I read a lot about how we're going to make sure that the cameras are working, that they're well oiled, they turn on and off, and the officers will be required to make sure that that recording device is working at the outset of their duty day. But it doesn't say anything about if they don't do it, what would happen.
Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, the agreement deals with on-body recording systems in a pretty comprehensive way, and it does include the cameras, whether the cameras are chest mount, lapel mount, head mount, helmet mount, the audio-only recording devices as well. The city has a lot of different platforms, and the city is engaged in a comprehensive study to look at those policies and practices and how those devices are currently being used. Before you can implement a truly uniform disciplinary policy, you have to standardize on your platforms, and you have to have all officers receive the same equipment and the same type of training so that you can have a standard disciplinary policy that fits within their matrix.
And Mr. President, I understand that, and I fully agree that we shouldn't be having somebody ride a stagecoach and somebody else in a Ferrari or whatever. Those are very different. That's not the issue. What I wanted to know, and maybe even be highlighted here, is some sort of matrix or best practices throughout the country, or some that people have come up with, to make sure that if someone does not turn on the camera, let's assume that they're all the same type and everybody's been trained on how to do it, that when they don't turn on the camera, what is the discipline or what is the matrix of disciplines to be adhered to that?
President Sanchez, Councilor Gardino, the standard is really progressive discipline in best practices nationally, that there's progressive discipline for violations of departmental policy, and that's consistent with what APD is doing now. The agreement clearly says if an incident is required to be reported by the departmental policy and an officer chooses or somehow does not report, the officer has to articulate the reasons why. So an officer can't suddenly come up with missing video without an explanation. And there should always be video or very, very strong reasons why.
And Mr. President, I agree that that is in the report. What I don't see, haven't been able to find, is, although it's progressive discipline, that what that progressive discipline is, and there's nowhere in here mentioned in the report that I've been able to locate. And I think that at one point or another we need to not necessarily get into the weeds of telling the chief or whomever is going to be doing that how to do it, but at least what are the mechanisms for disciplining someone.
Mr. President, Councilor Gardino, the agreement is silent on that because that's exactly what the city currently does with progressive discipline. And until you have a uniform platform, you You really can't change that. You can't treat officers or discipline one officer for the use of equipment that didn't work and somebody else differently. But that progressive discipline is current part of APD policy.
But right now, there's no reference in the section on on-body recording systems that references that. And I think it should be something that should be placed in here. And I don't know if that's an amendment that we need to make or how we need to get to that place so that people understand that if we have a very good progressive system of discipline, that will be incorporated in all aspects of discipline for all things ignored. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. And this is an executive communication, so I do not believe that we have the authority to amend this agreement.
Oh, nice. Great.
Mr. President, I would be very, very unhappy having to agree to something that we have actually, why me?
We have our city attorney to address that issue.
Mr. President, I'll call Mr. Melendez up here, but that is in our rules. We can vote the EC up or down, we can amend it.
Correct.
Mr. President.
Councilor Gordon.
And we're here for letters. But any amendments or corrections or additions that anyone of us might have are moot because they cannot be introduced.
Mr. Melendez, do you want to answer that question?
Mr. President, Councilor Arduino, the council's authority is it always is on an agreement comes down in the form of an executive communication from the mayor. As Mr. Zaman stated, the council's authority is limited to voting for or against the agreement. That doesn't necessarily mean that the council doesn't have a policy choice to vote its conscience on how it feels about that question, but procedurally, it's consistent with our rules and our past application of those rules that the council is going to approve or disapprove.
Are there any other questions? Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Benton. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Greenwood, I wanted to ask about section Roman numeral 6, starting on page 42, crisis intervention, and specifically part D of that section, which begins, bear with me here, on page 48, crisis prevention, which goes into considerable detail about the assignment of new staff or new officers, detectives to the crisis intervention unit and the coast. Really two entities that already exist in APD. One of the public comments that we heard earlier was that there was a concern, and on the face of it, I share the concern that our police officers, whether well-trained or not, are, if they're not mental health professionals, true mental health professionals, it's great for them to have the training, and I fully agree that they need that training. But we're in the midst of some work in the community, as you know, and this was also discussed with the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney, that is really taking a hard look at the needs in terms of behavioral health in the entire community. And a lot of that effort is focused on not having law enforcement being the first, in some instances at least, not always being the first encounter with someone who's having a behavioral health crisis. At the same time, I recognize, you know, and the agreement actually states at the opening of that subsection, APD shall utilize Coast and CU to follow up directly with chronically homeless individuals and individuals with a known mental illness who have a history of law enforcement encounters. And let's face it, a lot of the homeless and a lot of people with mental and behavioral problems have had law enforcement encounters, many times very minor ones, very minor ones. Other times, perhaps more concerning and serious ones. So there's a fine line there that I think that we're dealing with as a community and that we're going to have to deal with in enforcing this and moving forward with our parallel efforts with regard to behavioral health services and support. that we employ some of the suggestions that task force has already made, the behavioral health task force, having civilian engagement teams that would work as well. So how does this fit with that? Are we going to get hamstrung by this into tracking every person who's had, spit on a sidewalk or something that might have a behavioral health issue or a history of homelessness?
Mr. President, Councilor Benton, I'm glad you asked this question. I think it's important because behavioral health and mental health issues permeate this agreement. One of the biggest challenges in policing nationally today is interactions with people who are experiencing behavioral or mental health or emotional crises. And this agreement does several things that, again, leverage the strength that the city already has, recognizes the process that you've been engaged in. This expressly creates a mental health advisory committee, which should be...
Disagree with for one moment. Mr. Minsky, if you want to have a conversation, please take that out to the lobby.
I'm sorry?
If you want to have a conversation, please take that out to the lobby. We're trying to listen to our questions being addressed.
I don't speak loudly, just whispering.
Thank you, Mr. President. The city has been engaged in this process with a behavioral health task force, and we leveraged that strength by recognizing and requiring the agreement, the creation of the Mental Health Advisory Committee to evaluate different types of responses and different types of solutions. And if you'll look at the section on training for this section of the agreement, you'll also see that for the first time, dispatchers, the people who are the first point of contact when somebody calls 911, dispatchers are going to receive 20 hours of mental health and behavioral health training to help them identify indications that the person who's being called about, the subject of the call for assistance, that person may require a different type of response than simply a uniformed patrol car showing up with uniformed armed officers, but that other people may well be more appropriate first responders as well, as long as public safety is protected. So it's all there. And the flexibility of the agreement is it allows us to do exactly that. It allows us to modify existing practices in cooperation with our counterparts at DOJ and the agreement of the monitor. So that's all a possibility of this agreement.
And I think this the task force that's been working, it can be a resource and can be perhaps a subset of that task force could become this committee that's referred to in the agreement. And I think it's an important point about the 911 dispatchers. They are the first line. That's a tough call for one of those folks to make. And it may be a parallel system. I think things may have to be developed where the police are on call for the call as well as these civilian engagement teams, and because one or the other may not be the appropriate first response. But that's it's a fine detail, but it's a critical detail of how this part of the agreement succeeds or fails.
Councilor Gibson and then Councilor Penny.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a couple of things along those same lines. I really appreciated the detail of the training for behavioral health, mental health situations, for dispatchers, people who take calls. One question that came up, in particular, I just want to make a note that within paragraph 125, they talk about during basic crisis intervention that the trainers will be looking to identify officers with a special aptitude in this area, so they can be placed as they perhaps a first responder or one of the teams. I think that's a great idea. Wonderful. Here's my question. The people providing training for behavioral health and mental health issues, there's really nothing that in here that I could see, any qualifications, certifications. Would this be a regular trainer from the academy doing this, or was any thought or conversation devoted to that?
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, what the agreement does for training is it sets out requirements in subject areas. Some of that training will be internal. Some of that training, by necessity, will have to come from outside sources. And mental health training in particular is something that's pretty specialized. It requires mental health professionals who do this type of training to work with the department to make sure not just that everybody receives that 40 hours or the dispatchers get their 20, but to help identify the officers who really do have skills and aptitude in this area. So this is, the training is not all internal. In fact, in this area, it's mostly not. But the training will be something that the parties, again, the city, the Department of Justice, and the monitor will collectively evaluate that training to make sure that it is consistent with the requirements of the agreement.
Okay, great. One more?
Go and proceed.
Several places in here, it talks about at the chief's discretion. And so after I read that a few times, I started wondering about that. Could the police chief have the ability to override the monitor?
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, the phrase "at the chief's discretion" is used principally in two areas in the agreement. It's where the two areas that are most critical to the success of the implementation of this agreement by APD. That is internal affairs, because the internal affairs unit for the first time will be investigating serious uses of force, and it is in the new team that is being created, the implementation unit. The implementation unit is really, it's a planning process that will really have to oversee how every component of this agreement is complied with, whether we've trained to it, measured it, achieved it internally. So because those two units are so critical to they're mission critical to the success of this agreement for the city, the chief has to have the ability to staff those two units with people that he or she identifies as the most trustworthy, having the most subject matter expertise, and having the ability to really rise to that challenge. Those can't be haphazardly assigned.
I have one more question. The short question, the short answer. I lost my place. Maybe I don't have it. Oh, yes, data. Enormous amount of data. I know you spoke to that earlier. I noticed the chief isn't here. My question is does APD currently have a plan for data collection, organization, data entry? Do they have a plan to address this? I think this is an enormous part of it.
I think that's a great question, and the simple answer to it is that the chief and the police department are currently engaged in the purchase of new technology that is going to make the collection of that data both efficient and effective for the agency, as well as for satisfying this document. The technology that they have selected is the very best that's out on the market right now. And not just best because a company says so, it's best because it has been proven that way through employment in police agencies across the United States and actually outside the United States. So we're very encouraged by the work that's already being done by the chief and his staff in terms of data collection, in terms of selecting technology for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pena?
I'm going to try to ask my questions really quick. So under the use of force, how is this different from the current SOP on force investigations? It seems very similar. And then I'm just going to ask like a three-pronged question. And then use of force that does not rise to the level of serious use of force or that do not indicate apparent criminal conduct by an officer will be reviewed by the chain of command. How is that determined? And then lastly, for serious uses of force, what defines the serious?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, another great area for a question, because this is very, very different from past practice for APD. Previous practice when there was a use of force was really just asking the question, is it justified or is it not justified? The process that the department has started to engage in since Chief Eden became chief, and which is memorialized in the agreement, really does two different things. It pushes responsibility for supervision to start where it really needs to, which is the frontline supervisor, the sergeant. So the sergeants will have responsibility for close and effective supervision of the people under their command. But those sergeants will also be, for the first time, really conducting true investigations of use of force, rather than just checking a box or saying, yes, it was justified, no, it was not. And the provisions in the agreement regarding investigations of serious use of force, that's outside of the chain of command. It's done by internal affairs, and then it goes to the Force Review Board, and ultimately which is headed by the assistant chief, and ultimately to the chief. That is a way so that serious uses of force are not just dealt with in an area of command, but become a departmental-wide initiative, so that there are not secrets and there are not silos based upon geography. So everything goes that way.
So what's determining serious, what defines serious use of force? So what are some of the characteristics? It's not outlined in here. Is that going to be determined later?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, serious use of force is specifically defined in the definition section of the agreement. It means all uses of lethal force, all critical firearms discharges, all uses of force that result in serious physical injury or requiring hospitalization, all head, neck, and throat strikes with an object or neck holds, all uses of force that result in the use of loss of consciousness, all canine bites, more than 2 applications of an electronic control weapon or baton, any strike, blow, kick, ECW application, or similar use of force against restrained subjects, or, like I said, it's more than 3 strikes with a baton. So it's defined not just by the level of force, but by the quantity of force. It's a specifically defined term.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple more things. I'll try to be as quick as possible. So, Councilor Bettnick stepped out, but he asked some questions regarding the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee that is going to be set up within 6 months. Is this going to consist of some of the task force members? That may have been asked. I think it's...
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, that's permitted under the agreement because the city has already been engaged in that process. The agreement requires the city to have that mental health advisory committee. It doesn't say where they come from. And again, there should be no reason why there shouldn't be a lot of synergy between that group or even be a subset of the existing group.
And then, Mr. President, so you have city contracted mental health professionals. How many? And who's going to determine how many there will be?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, the agreement requires there to be the right number. And what the department currently estimates is that they need 12 people in this capacity, but in terms of mental health contracted professionals, there's a psychiatrist who's currently used. The staffing assessment will help us determine what the right staffing level is for those provisions too.
Mr. President. So then again, under the crisis intervention, it says APD shall maintain a sufficient number of crisis intervention certified responders who are specially trained officers across the department who retain their normal duties, responsibilities. Not clear on how many, again, who's going to make that determination?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, that will also be addressed in the staffing study. The goal is to have sufficient numbers of those enhanced level trained responders so that there are always people on duty on every shift throughout the city. That's the goal. We have to determine what that number looks like. They have a pretty good idea of what the number is likely to be, but rather than commit to the specific number in the agreement and find out it's wrong, the staffing study is really going to help us get there too.
Mr. President, one quick, so under early intervention systems, within 9 months of the effective date, APDs shall revise and update its early intervention system. Who is this now? They say that we're gonna, who's this now? Who is this within APD?
Mr. President, Councilor Pena, an early intervention system in most agencies, it's an integrated set of software that works with your existing internal affairs system, and it's designed to measure certain types of thresholds for conduct and incidents so that it will identify an officer to her or his supervisor for follow-up. Too many sick days, too many absences on a Monday or a Friday, too many vehicle accidents within a certain amount of time, too much use of force within a finite amount of time. That's what an early intervention system does.
Yeah, and I apologize. I meant to ask, where is it at? Where is this located now?
It's a system, and it's part of what the department is starting to implement through this best-in-class internal affairs and EIS integrated system. So that's something, it will go live far before 9 months. Because it shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be possible to have a dozen or 24 internal affairs cases or civilian complaints and nobody knows about it. This is exactly the sort of thing that an EIS is designed to flag and designed to have thresholds for.
Actually, there are members of the department that are in Florida this week being trained in the operation of that technology for internal affairs and for an EIS system. And we're hopeful that it will be able to go online as early as February of 2015. So in the very near future, we should start to see at least parts of this system being placed.
So it isn't, because see, in the report it just says that they'll revise an update, and I didn't know that we had one currently. So, and you're saying that it's going to go live, so maybe there's just not.
Actually, a system has been being developed for several months now. Chief Eden and his staff have taken the initiative before this was even required to be examining different systems that are in the marketplace and those that have been the most successful, and they've settled on one that we believe is extraordinary.
So we don't have one to revise or update, we're actually purchasing the software.
Mr. President and Councilor Pena, the short answer to that question was prior to the last couple of months or the review of the system in the last 7 months, no.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Council Vice President Jones, and we'll go back to Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick, I want to go back to something that Councilor Garcia said, and I think probably you can help us with this, and that is there is not in this agreement anything about the discipline if the cameras, lapel cameras aren't on. I understand that part, and I'm going to question it. But my question is, in the past, it has not been terribly consistent how they're used or what happens. What is the process set up to set the disciplinary action to make sure that it is standard and enforced? Who will be doing it and how will it be
done? The system that is going to be put in place, or that is being put in place, is obviously going to start with the establishment of a policy and procedure that can be applied to a standardized platform in the technology. So the city will have to decide on a platform that is going to be issued to the officers and then train to that platform. Once the training is completed, a policy and procedure will be put in place, and there will be the availability for supervisors inside the organization to audit the use of these cameras, so we won't have to wait until an incident occurs to see whether or not the camera systems are being used. There will actually be an ongoing audit being used so we can determine if, when, and how officers are using those systems. If they are using it as designed, that's good, and we will make note of that. If they are not using it, then that's not good, and certainly attention will be provided to those officers, and it could be in the form of training, it could be in the form of discipline. It's actually all depends on the circumstances that will be discovered, and obviously the explanation of the officer for why he or she is or is not using the camera
system or the on-body recording system as it is designed to be used and in compliance with the agency's policies and procedures.
One person.
Thank you, Mr. President. And when we go just a little bit further, I think I understand what you're saying and how it will be, but who will be responsible? Will it be the chief? Will it be the EPOA? Will the monitor have something to say about this before it goes
All of
into
the
effect?
above, quite frankly. Ultimately, the chief is responsible for the operations, but the chief is going to push down that duty and responsibility all the way down to frontline supervisors. One of the checks and balances systems is that when there is an issue that does occur, a complaint's filed, a use of force, some type of serious auto action, whatever it is that's out there, if that activity that the officer was engaged in should have been recorded, that recording itself will be part of the reporting system. So say we have a use of force out there, it's not just to go, excuse me, go out and take a look and investigate and write up a report. There's actually a requirement that the recording of that incident be reviewed by the supervisor and addressed specifically by the supervisor. And then the system is set up so that supervisors next level of command will have to review not just the incident itself, but also ensure that that supervisor did everything he or she was supposed to do in terms of investigating and reviewing the activity. That goes all the way up to the police chief, and then ultimately the monitor will be responsible for taking a look at all of these instances and determining whether or not the agency is in compliance with these requirements of this system. So yes, the agency is going to be responsible for implementation, and then the monitor and the monitoring team will be responsible for making sure that the agency is doing what they say they do. And that is all going to be documented in a very public report, initially 3 times a year for the first 2 years. So it will be a big news item when those reports are issued by the monitor.
Mr. President, Councilor Jones, the critical paragraph in the agreement, I think that really reaches the point you're making, is paragraph 228, which states as follows. Officers who wear on-body recording systems shall be required to articulate on camera or in writing their reason if they fail to record an activity that is required by APD policy to be recorded. Intentional or otherwise unjustified failure to activate an on-body recording system when required by APD policy shall subject the officer to discipline. Not may, shall.
Councilor Gibson?
Just a little bit more about on-body recording. And I appreciate that the fact that we need uniformity throughout APD and all of the officers. But because that has been such an issue for us, I think I would have been more comfortable to see language in here that requires it, whatever it may be, for all interactions with the public. And it's a little disappointed that it was not there. The other thing is getting back to data, and this, I have this image in my mind about a mountain of paper that needs to go into a system. It would have been nice to have, in fact, I'm surprised that APD is not here. A few exceptions noted, but, and without getting into the weeds too much as far as the how are we going to do this, or, you know, whatever will become of that, it would have been nice to have APD. They were here in great force on Monday night, ironically, I'll note. But anyway, so there's a comment, sorry that APD's here, not here, and to answer some of the specific questions that we are posing, and about the on-body recording. Can you maybe talk about why it's not in here that recordings will not be required for all interactions with the public?
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, The section in the agreement on body recording systems recognizes that the city is currently engaged in a study with the University of New Mexico to evaluate a couple different things about how current video equipment is used. Who's using them, when are they using them, how are they using them, are they turning them off, are they leaving them on, is it too much, is it too little? And that is reflected in the agreement, and that's why the agreement requires the parties, after that assessment is done, to come back and give community input on what the proper policies for the use of this important safety equipment really is.
And I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to the federal monitor, Mr. Greenwood. I think you stated that the city council will approve the monitor that is selected. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
And if we don't approve that monitor, if it's a 4 to 5 vote in objection to the monitor that is hired, then what takes place?
Then, Mr. President, what would happen is there wouldn't be a monitor chosen by the parties, and each party would then submit 3 names to the federal judge who will oversee this, and it would be completely within the court's discretion at that point to pick a monitor.
So basically, if we don't approve it, then it would be up to the courts to make that selection. Is that correct?
I guess so, Mr. President.
And how will the application process start? Because I think that the report states that a federal monitor will be chosen in 60 days. Is that from the date that is filed with the courts, federal courts?
Mr. President, what the agreement requires is we used a very ambitious date for what we call the effective date of the agreement, so that it will start the clock ticking for all the deadlines and all implementation. The effective date as the agreement that will be the threshold for all of the dates is the day the agreement is signed and then filed with the court, and at that point, that's when our 60 days starts. We got a little bit of a head start because the request for information went out the same day the agreement was announced, and it's already widely circulated among policing professional groups.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And continuing on with the idea of the monitor, the compliance reviews, the monitor is responsible for writing compliance reviews that states the progress of where the department is, and I guess the progress of following the agreement. Where do those agreements, I guess the reviews come to? Do they come to the administration, or how are they disseminated?
Mr. President, Councilman Lewis, those are public. So when there's an assessment by the monitor of compliance with the conditions of the agreement, that'll be something that's issued to the parties and will be public. So we'll know in the first 2 years of the agreement every 4 months, and then afterwards every 6 months, we'll get those compliance assessments. One thing I especially wanted to point out, this hasn't been done in any of the other agreements yet, and it really is a first in this model, and it really should help make this agreement a model for other communities. It has a 2.5-year comprehensive reassessment provision built into the agreement. That means notwithstanding all the work that everyone will have done for implementation and all the reports back and forth with the monitor, that at year 2.5, we take a comprehensive look from top to bottom of what's going on with APD and what's consistent with the settlement agreement and what areas still need some attention. And that is designed so that we have this constant conversation so that there won't be any surprises. The goal is to be at full compliance in 2 years or an exit at 4, but at 2.5 years, we have the ability to hit reset if things are not in full compliance the way we expect them to be. And that's really, that is to avoid having a situation where the department can't come into compliance, or situations in some of these other communities where a 5-year agreement turns out to be 12 or 13 or 22.
Your thoughts on the expectation, and I guess you just said this, the expectation of that monitor would be that the city would come into full compliance within 2 years. And so that's what the monitor is going to be looking for. And I guess if the expectation is 2 years, then you have a monitor that would be looking for the department complying with everything on here, and that's what they're going to. Unless there's something just I guess something we just cannot comply to, or But, I mean, those reports, I think, you know, every regularly are going to be with the intent that if we're not complying right now, that we would be complying shortly and we would hit that mark of 2 years.
Mr. President, Councilor Lewis, it's even better than that because we're engaged in a real partnership. The administration, council, the police department, and our counterparts and colleagues at the Department of Justice. We're going to continue the conversation. So we're not just waiting for monitor reports. We meet with them at least every month. So the monitor, there should be no surprises in any monitor's report. And that is designed so that we can take constant, small corrective steps if necessary. What the agreement contemplates is not just hitting full compliance, our goal at 2 years, but then really sustained compliance. That's keeping in compliance. It's harder to come into compliance than to stay there, and that's why the goal, it's ambitious, but it's achievable. And it is something that the parties are really committed to in this agreement, and that's how we achieve it.
Councilor Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be real quick because I just want a clarification on what Council President asked also, and that is, if there is no agreement, if you will, by council as to who's been brought forward by both parties, you say there will be three names on each side to be submitted to the court will then choose from those 6?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardenia, yes, that's the process. That's the fallback provision of the agreement. And candidly, in cities where that's happened, it doesn't work out so well. So it really does behoove us to work with our colleagues at the DOJ to find the right person and the right team to be monitored for this very important agreement.
Right, and Mr. President, I guess that also lifts up the fact that if all of us were going and making this decision, it would be much better than coming to us with sort of a done deal idea and us having to decide, well, let's send it to the courts. And I don't think that, as you just mentioned, is a good idea, but it's an even better idea to have participation on some level so that the monitor is someone that this body or all people that are part of the process to agree on, and rather than be surprised by someone who, for whatever reasons, we just cannot support, or 5 of us can't support, then we're back into a bad situation.
Mr. President, Councilor Gardenia, as you know, I have briefed and we have briefed and worked with members of council and your staff throughout this process, and we certainly contemplate that throughout the selection and evaluation process for the monitor, that you would receive the same briefing, the same input, the same ability to evaluate and look at and evaluate those candidates. So you will receive all of that information as well. And it's a two-way conversation.
Mr. President, so your intent is to make sure that this monitor or team of monitors that is a surprise to anyone?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardenia, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will end the questioning, and if the council wish to make a closing statement, they can do so at this time. After their closing statements and everyone is done speaking, then we will have a roll call vote. Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilors, this has really been a long process, but I think we are very far down the road when the DOJ came in. And I think that the City Council has done a lot of good work from that moment on. I think the behavior health initiative that has been, the whole council has been involved in, along with the county commission, along with the state legislature and the state agencies. I think that that is going to really change the way that behavior health is seen in the city and in the state. I think that the Civilian Police Oversight Agency with this council has passed, and the Police Oversight Board is going to really make lots of changes in the way we do things. And I know that we just found out we have about 80 applicants for the Police Oversight Board, which means that the citizens of Albuquerque are very much involved and on that. And I also was very impressed with the Department of Justice coming in and how they worked not only with the administration and the police department, and how impressed with the police department, how far they've come and how some of the initiative that they've already put into place. But I was really impressed with the Department of Justice and how they met with the neighborhood groups. And I had a group of my coalition from District 4 come in and meet with them, and they were very responsive in answering the questions that my constituents had. And so it's been a long process. I know we still have a very long process left, but I really think from the day the DOJ came in that we are very far down the road.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? Councilor Beck?
Well, just briefly with regard to, the role of the council in the discussions leading up to this agreement. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice were, I think, pretty clear to us upfront that they were going to be negotiating this with the executive branch of government, and that that's the way they normally operate. Similar investigations across the country. So that was something that was clear up front. And it doesn't mean I was satisfied with that, but that's the way they laid it out up front. And they were open to us. We did meet with them. I think many of us met with them in that during that period from the time that their initial letter was released up until the present. And that's the nature of our government, our city government. And they're not going to be able to negotiate with a group of 9. That's kind of the way it is. And it is disappointing to me as well, Councilor Gibson, that I don't see the chief here tonight. And the mayor wasn't able to stick around and listen to the public comment or to this debate. But nonetheless, I think that's a result really of, and it's an indicator that we're kind of just here as a, I'm not sure what we call it, I hate to use the word rubber stamp. But we're being asked to rubber stamp basically this agreement that was negotiated by others. And, but I do appreciate the access that we've had to the DOJ and the U.S. Attorney. And I'm confident we will continue to. And I think it's on us to some extent to continue to do that. And also, just speaking with Mr. Zaman, we might have a role in the appointment of this the committee, the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. Like, we've already taken a step forward in that. We should stay on that issue. We should stay on top of that. And obviously, we'll be staying on top of how the Civilian Police Oversight Agency rolls out. But we have a limited role in this, this particular agreement. We have to just acknowledge that, and I just want the public to understand.
Councilor Lewis, and then Councilor Governor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we can all remember back to, it was around 2011 on this council, where some of the discussions regarding the DOJ and some of the first, I think, talk, I think it was this council that reached that suggestion, and I, for one, was supportive of that, and thought that that was, at the time, even though it was something that was early on, I think, in this crisis, I think that we've been through, that because of the distrust and because because of the even the I guess some of the pending issues and challenges that we saw, it was important that if there were some dark closets, that we open up those closed doors and that we shine a light on it. So for me it was something of a transparency issue from the very beginning. But it was this council, I think, that along with the people in this community, that first began to express a need, and ultimately this council will be making a formal request for a Department of Justice investigation. And those findings came out, initial review. We spent a lot of months discussing those. This council, I think, has we have our ear, I think, closer than I think anywhere in city government, to the people in the city, not only from these meetings here, and I know sometimes it seems like in these meetings that we have to have some order and we have to go about things in a way that's more formal. But this council and individuals I know on this council, including me, have had a lot of conversations with people that have been concerned and wanted to share ideas, and certainly wanted to just I guess vent, and I've had a lot of personal conversations with people. My doors have always been open, and sometimes people think that we're I guess hard to reach, right? In those, I just don't think that's the case. I mean, I heard Councilor Winter at a meeting last night give out his cell phone. I do that. I know other members of this council give out our personal cell phones to people, to large groups of people, individuals, and so we take phone calls, we have meetings, and so I guess I mentioned that to say that has been a big part of this process, and us listening and being close to the people, their concerns, and now we look forward to ensuring that this agreement is followed, and that we comply with these things, and I think it's very important. So certainly in many ways the work continues, and certainly, but at the same time, I think we have a clear direction to reform and a real change, and turn to a new chapter for this department, and certainly for our city.
Councilor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. President. And for me, not unlike Councilor Lewis, this started a long time ago when a lot of folks in the community came to me and said, what's going on? Why are we having such trouble with the police department? And I started asking questions of the IRO at the present time, or at that time, Mr. Deaton, I think that was his name. And there was a great reluctance, and in fact there was a lot of pushback, not wanting to really talk about it because it was privacy issues, it was personnel issues, and we can't talk about those things in public. So that, and I think, gave a lot of the community who've been talking to us angst, and said, we need to do something. And I go back to what Councilor Lewis said, and I remember, in fact, I was walking around the plaza in Santa Fe when I got a phone call from Councilor Lewis, and Councilor Lewis said, would you continue with me to bring forward some legislation? And we did. It passed. It was vetoed, and then it was not overridden. So we've been doing this a long time. We also have been very close, as Councilor Lewis has said, to the nerve point in the community. And we are able to then respond to folks out in the public. And I'm not ashamed, in fact, I'm proud of saying that I've been at a lot of the rallies and marches because I believed in it, still do. And if things go awry and things don't go as well as I think they should go, and the community comes back to me and says, things aren't working, I will join them in any way that I think is necessary to make sure that the public's being listened to. So I want this report and this process to work, but it has to work for everybody, and not just those people who think they own it, because the community owns this report.
Right.
They're the ones that made sure that this went through the whole process of making sure that the DOJ came in. The DOJ was reluctant, I think, in the beginning to do anything until things got settled. Some, I hate to say this, but some smoke and mirrors were thrown up, and there was kind of tacit satisfaction, but obviously the problems continue. I don't want those problems to continue even after this report. I want to make sure that this report is what it is, and it does what it says it's going to do, and that the community gains respect for what they do, and the police department gains the respect of the community, who really we represent. We are the representatives of the community, and we're the ones that they come to. And if we're not up front, we're wanting to help them, then I think we're failing. And we're failing now. Folks who are working diligently every time. I think that we have a good document, but I want to make sure that it works well for everybody. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Benyon.
Well, unlike Councilor Lewis and Councilor Garduño, this is my first year on City Council. It's been a year now that I've been elected and coming on board, and one of the first things that hits is this whole thing with APD. And it's been a trying year, but I think we've come to a good place in terms of the settlement agreement. And I agree with Councilor Benton. I think we've played a limited role, but we knew in advance that what our role was. I just really want to commend the family members who've lost a loved one. I think this is something that's going to be a tremendous healing process for them. And the community members who've come out and kind of made and held people accountable for what they felt was wrong in the community. There's a lot of good people out there, and they're touting or shouting the voices, being the voice for the community. Mr. Gomez, Mr. Alice, Mr. Torres, Diana Vargas. I think she's a tremendous community organizer. I remember her from when she was a little girl in the neighborhood. Her mom used to work at Alamos Elementary School, so she's turned out to be a fine young lady. Mr. Angelo DeSilvio, he lost a very close friend, and he's here because he's not trying to, I don't believe that they're trying to fight with APD or fight with anybody in particular. I believe that they're here because they felt that there was something unjust that had happened, and that they're here to be the voice for those people that aren't here any longer. There's other folks like community members, Roger Nicholson, who's been here throughout, really touting and talking about the community perspective. And of course, Miss Jennifer Ott, she's been here and she's spoken on behalf of APD, and I commend her for that too. Took a lot of courage to come out here and do that, when some of the stronger voices were in opposition of APD. And I want to, Stephanie Lopez, the APD president for APOA, I think she's just done a tremendous job speaking out on behalf of APD, because we have to support our officers. I think that we have a tremendous force. Was there some flaws, and is there some flaws? Absolutely, and that's why we're dealing with this situation. But she was here to be the voice for police officers, and I really congratulate them. They were the ones that were here also trying to keep decorum here at City Council, and through the protests they were out there as well. And I'm sure some of these things that were said about them were very hurtful as well. And so I wanted to thank the men and women of the police department. And then, of course, the city councilors, like Councilor Benton stated, that City Council, we've kind of, have played a limited role. There's certain things we can and can't do. But, everyone sitting here and listening to the community, I think you guys have done a tremendous job in just really trying to identify ways that we can contribute, with the task force and with the mental health and, other legislation that's being pushed and trying to reform APD. I think I'm proud to say that I'm here with you all. And of course to the administration, I know it's been a difficult time as well. Trying to kind of stir through all this, and we've all been kind of confused in what to do. And I hope that this settlement agreement will set us in the right path in terms of really being able to heal our community. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. I'd like to make a couple of closing remarks. And first, I would like to say that I'm very disappointed that the chief is not here this evening. I think this is a very important meeting. When we were voting on retention bonuses, we had many of the upper command here talking about the retention bonuses and supporting that. But this, I believe, is a very important meeting tonight, and that the council, we are playing a limited role in what is being done here. But again, Mr. Zaman met with us because he was basically working with Mr. Greenwood and Mr. Stryker, and I had several meetings with Mr. Zaman on what was going on with the DOJ. And I want to personally thank our U.S. Attorney, Dana Martinez, for his work and his role, because they did reach out to the community. This process, as Councilor Garduño and Councilor Lewis has said, went back beyond the 2 years that the investigation has been going on. And Mr. Martinez opened the doors to the members of the public. There was several public meetings. They also opened the door to listen to the police officers of rank and file And it's important that the community has buy-in. You know, this has to be a workable agreement that the police officers can also buy into. But again, we've faced some serious problems over the last few years. The Department of Justice began the investigation, and that was launched in November of 2012. So for 2 years, the U.S. Department of Justice has been here, reaching out to the community, talking to members of the council, because I had several meetings with the Department of Justice, and also, you know, working with our staff, Mr. Greenwood and Mr. Stryker. I don't agree with everything in the agreement, but I think this is a step in the right direction. I believe that this is a historical moment in our city, and that we must entrust the men and women that serve our community in the Albuquerque Police Department to work with this agreement to make our city of Albuquerque a safer place and make the Albuquerque Police Department the best department in America. And I believe that we can do that with the people that we have working for the Albuquerque Police Department. They will have to make sacrifices because they will have to buy into this agreement. And we as a council must provide the necessary dollars to make sure that we conform and comply with this settlement agreement. It will be filed with the courts, and this will be signed on November the 10th. Again, I would hope that some of the members of the public are invited to this signing. We will not be signed as members of the council, but I think we are taking the step in the right direction. And again, I think this is a defining moment, as U.S. Attorney Damon Martinez said, in the history of our city, that we work in collaboration with the community. And I'm very pleased to see that there's an issue regarding staffing that is in the findings, because I do not believe that we have enough men and women today working on the Albuquerque Police Department, and they're spread thin. I mean, they're responding to priority 1 calls all the time. They don't have enough men and women working on the streets of Albuquerque, and we are emphasizing community-based policing. But we must give them the tools and the manpower to make sure that they can, you know, have the reach out to the community and provide community-based policing that we had at one time. To me, this is one of the most important issues that I will vote on, and I am going to, at this time, ask for a roll call vote from members of the council before we close.
Mr. President, one procedural question, and that is, I heard a while ago that ECs obviously can't not amend, but is there a possibility for this report, and I don't know if it's Mr. Greenwood or who would be able to answer that, but is it possible for going forward, if the monitor or someone goes to the monitor and says, this is not working, that could be changed, or is it cast in stone? And I don't know whether I've gotten that clear.
Mr. Greenwood?
Mr. President, Councilor Gardenia, the agreement specifically says that we can change its provisions if we find that some things aren't working. And it's built in a number of mechanisms that allow us to do that. So if something doesn't seem to be working out well for us in the implementation, we have the ability, the parties working with the monitor, to change that. Yes.
So, Mr. President, so not to change it, you know, whole cloth, but to change parts of it, we'd be able to, not we, but somebody would be able to go forward and say, yes, let's change it.
Yes.
And one other thing, Mr. President, I want to emphasize the fact that council staff should be kept apprised of everything that's going on at every single step. Without them knowing that, there's no way for us to then be able to find out what's going on in the process. So I insist that council staff be included. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor President. At this time, we have a motion and a second for EC 194, and I will ask for a roll call vote. Councilor Benton?
Yes.
Councilor Harrison, excuse. Councilor Gibson?
Yes.
Council Vice President Jones?
Yes.
Councilor Sanchez? Yes. Councilor Winter?
Yes.
Councilor Pena?
Yes.
Councilor Lewis?
Yes.
And Councilor Gardner?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries on an 8-0
No
vote.
justice, yes to bullshit.
There's no further business before this council. This meeting is adjourned.